On the night of October 9th, Pakistan carried out a series of attacks in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. According to some reports, this was an attempt to target a convoy of anti-Pakistan militants referred to as Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, or TTP for short. So what's going on here? Why is there cross-border clashes between Afghanistan and Pakistan? Who are the TTP and what do these countries and militant groups want? It's a complex issue, and inshallah I'll try and break it down as much as I can in this short video. We have to go back decades during the British colonial rule. It's like a cliche now that when we look at the seeds of conflicts, then this tends to go back to European colonial era, whether we're talking about Palestine, Kashmir, Nigeria, or a host of other conflicts and hotspots. It tends to be a result of Western colonization of Muslim lands. But the conflict between Afghanistan and Pakistan fundamentally has, at least in part, to do with the maps that Britain drew up during its colonial control over India. This is called the Durand Line, drawn up in 1893 by Sir Mortimer Durand, a British diplomat. That's why it's called the Durand Line, named after this British diplomat. It's a 2,670 kilometre border that defined British India's sphere of influence and prevent Russian expansion into South Asia. The legacy of this Durand Line is that Afghanistan never recognized it as an international boundary. That's because it divides the Pashtun population between what's now Pakistan and Afghanistan. Thus, it's created the political tensions ever since, primarily because it divided this Pashtun population. After Pakistan's creation in 1947, Kabul actually opposed Pakistan's UN membership, citing the Durand Line as the dispute. Therefore, throughout the decades, there have been border skirmishes with Afghan support for Pashtun nationalism. Because of the tribal and familial links across the two countries, the border has largely been seen as artificial, an artifact from British colonial rule. However, during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the US was able to exploit the relationship that existed between Pakistan and Afghan Pashtun tribes. During the 1980s, Pakistan, with US and Saudi backing, supported the Afghan Mujahideen through their covert operations. Pakistan facilitated the transport of weapons to Afghan Mujahideen, hosted millions of Afghan refugees, providing training camps and logistics to fight against the Soviet invasion. After the fall of the Soviet Union and the defeat that they faced in Afghanistan, Pakistan exploited its relationship with Afghan Mujahideen, helped facilitate the rise of the Taliban to power. Pakistani generals often looked to Afghanistan as a way to help Pakistan create strategic depth, building a loyal client state that would support Pakistan against any Indian aggression, as well as help increase its potential infrastructure, giving it access to Central Asia, China and Russia. However, after 9/11, the invasion and occupation of Afghanistan, George W. Bush famously uttered the words that you're either with us or with the terrorists.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
General Pervez Musharraf, who had undertaken a coup against the then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, gave his unstinting support to America after these demands were placed upon it. It was clearly seen as a betrayal of the Taliban in Afghanistan, as Pakistan had given over its air bases, its military bases, to American Western powers to launch an invasion and help sustain an occupation against Afghanistan. Tens of thousands of Muslims in Afghanistan died, but the Taliban were well used to undertaking guerrilla-style warfare against a foreign invader. They melted into the countryside and used their links amongst the Pashtun tribes in both Afghanistan and Pakistan to regroup and form a guerrilla-style resistance movement against Western occupation. America, unhappy that the Taliban had access to Pashtun support networks from both sides of the border and feeling that Pakistan were covertly engaged with at least some members of the Taliban, had demanded that Pakistan target their own Pashtun population in Pakistan. Basically help prosecute America's war on terror, which is more like a war of terror against their own Pakistani population. This resulted in operations against suspected Taliban or other militant groups in places like Waziristan or federally administered tribal areas also known as Fatah. One key event also needs to be mentioned was that of Lal Masjid massacre undertaken by Pakistani army when a standoff occurred at a prominent mosque known for calling for an Islamic system of government like Nizam al-Mustafa. This was also seen as a mosque known as a recruitment point for the Mujahideen against Soviet invasion. This standoff led to a massacre resulting in over 100 teachers and students being killed inside this masjid by Pakistani rangers. They are known to be used for the dirty work for the Pakistani military. As a result of this, as well as Pakistani military operations conducted with America against Taliban and other anti-Western resistance groups in Pakistan, it helped foment anger and hatred towards the Pakistani government. This resulted in the formation of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, TTP. By the way, we also know that while America demanded Pakistan to move against its own populations to help America prosecute its war in Afghanistan against the Taliban, we also saw a rise of terrorist attacks against Pakistan. Bombings in marketplaces, against Shia mosques and army cadet schools. There's always been suspicion that this was at least in part instigated by America to bring a more proactive response from Pakistan.
We now know that an American accused of shooting and killing 2 Pakistanis last month is not an embassy employee, as the embassy had originally indicated. He is a CIA contractor.
The CIA director, the head of the Joint Chiefs, and even the president himself are calling for Raymond Davis's release. But inside Pakistan, there's a growing call for the government to stand up to the U.S. and put Davis on trial.
The operations against Waziristan and these various federally administered tribal areas that took place, as well as the massacre at Lal Masjid, had caused a huge uproar in Pakistan, upset that their military was being used not only on behalf of America, but also against their own population. But the series of militant attacks against civilians helped to reshape the wider Pakistani public's opinion to at least become passive to Pakistan's operation against these border areas between Afghanistan and Pakistan. So that's just a brief background, and I know it's a lot to digest, but I hope it helps to give some understanding of the current conflict. Fundamentally, the emergence of TTP can be seen as a byproduct of Pakistan's unstinting support for America's war on terror. Also, the unresolved border dispute between Afghanistan and Pakistan over the Durand Line, as well as the perceived secular status of the Pakistan's ruling system. Ultimately, the TTP was born out of disputes that have their origins in Western interference in Muslim lands. TTP are not the same as Taliban, at least on paper. The TTP sees its conflict with the Pak government as bound within nationalistic boundaries of Pakistan. They see this as not as an attempt to create a separate state or redraw the map so that they become part of Afghanistan, but rather they see this as an attempt to overthrow a secular system in Pakistan and bring about some sort of Sharia quote-unquote Taliban-style system. They have at times had links with Al-Qaeda and even operated with ISIS when it benefited them. However, they have subsequently distanced themselves from both groups, even on occasions having fought against the ISIS. The Afghan Taliban do not officially have any relations with the TTP and have argued that this is essentially a Pakistani problem, not a problem that involves them.
With regards to the TTP question, there are no safe havens of TTP in Afghanistan. Even right to our return to Kabul, Pakistan military carried out operations in the tribal areas and they displaced a large number of people. This battle is taking place 400, 500, 800, 1,000 kilometers inside Pakistan. So it should control itself.
At the same time, Pakistan has accused the Afghan Taliban of providing safe haven for the TTP in Afghanistan. Hence, Pakistan's argument is that while they are being attacked by the TTP in Pakistan, that the TTP then melt away back into Afghanistan. Thus, they see it as fair game to target the TTP in Afghanistan if the Taliban won't themselves undertake actions against them, i.e. against the TTP. Two things further complicate this issue. Firstly is India. They've been in discussions with the Afghan Taliban for the potential to normalize their relations with them, with India. Thus, it would mean India recognizing the legitimacy of the Taliban's rule over Afghanistan.
Let me welcome you and your delegation to India. Your visit marks an important step in advancing our ties and affirming the enduring friendship between India and Afghanistan. A very, very warm welcome, and I invite you to make your opening remarks.
This creates fear in Pakistan, who, like I said, see Afghanistan as some strategic asset for them to create this strategic depth. Any close ties with India would be seen as a potential threat to Pakistan, especially with the TTP and their constant attacks. Secondly is America. Trump recently demanded the use of Bagram Air Base, which has been, refused. The Taliban have refused their request or their quote-unquote demands.
We were going to keep Bagram, the big air base, one of the biggest air bases in the world. We gave it to them for nothing. We're trying to get it back, by the way. Okay, that could be a little breaking news. We're trying to get it back.
Therefore, some have seen this as America attacking Afghanistan via Pakistan as a way to put pressure on the Taliban to capitulate to America's demand and give over Bagram Airport. Ultimately, there's two main issues at play. Firstly is the border dispute, and secondly is the type of governance required for both Afghanistan and Pakistan. Sadly, both countries still operate according to Western-imposed nation-state models. These are relatively modern states, particularly Pakistan in 1947. The Durand Line is an artificial line in the sand that simply doesn't make sense. It was drawn up by British diplomats. The radical solution, therefore, would be to actually dissolve this border. This would benefit both Afghanistan and Pakistan. For Afghanistan, Pakistan could offer them the ability to enter Pakistani marketplace in order to trade their goods and engage in commerce. But also, it would allow Pakistan real strategic depth, as well as a potential for both lands to share resources, not only just population resources, but also, as we know, Afghanistan is rich in rare earth minerals, and Pakistan has newly discovered offshore oil fields. It would therefore help to create trade between both countries and utilize the capacities that both countries have. It would also help develop a real trade route between Afghanistan and Pakistan, one that could properly incorporate trade routes with China, Russia, Central Asia, while also utilizing Pakistan's ports. We already know about CPEC. This is a trade corridor between China and Pakistan that leads to Pakistani ports. But one thing that stands in the way of fully utilizing this is the security concerns through places like KP province or the FATA region. Obviously, the Uyghur Muslim consideration needs to be high on the agenda for any relations with China. But think about the stability this would create. The stability between unifying Afghanistan and Pakistan would actually benefit both peoples, both countries. The current artificial borders and the tensions that has created creates instability and instability with this trade route. It just simply doesn't benefit the peoples of both lands. But that leads to the second issue, which is the type of governance and society. Afghan Taliban have argued that their style of government is built upon their particular cultural views and practices, basically the urf of their society. It's not something that they see exportable to other countries. And certainly there are fundamental flaws in the way they administer their laws and how they view themselves within the confines of a nation-state model, and how also culture has influenced their view of the Sharia, particularly how it comes to restricting of women's rights, some of which is primarily informed by culture and not by the Sharia. But secular governments have failed Pakistan too, as it's failed the entire Muslim world. Secular governments within nation-state boundaries is just not how the Muslims are meant to revive. We are effectively like fish out of a water. Islam has views on accountable government, elections, economic growth, utilization of public resources, judiciary and societal relations. It was Islamic governance that allowed Islam to spread across the globe. It's Islamic governance that provided stability for majority of the Muslim history. That has to be part of the conversation, how Islam solves problems. Just like Islam had the ability to unify warring factions in Medina between Banu Aws and Banu Khazraj, similarly Islam can become the unifying factor again between Afghanistan and Pakistan. With the current nation-state model, each state seeks its own personal benefit and interest, even if it means going against the interest and benefit of another country. That is a cause for tension and clash, not a cause for unity. Islam isn't a backward religion, for a group of tribes, but has the capacity through ijtihad to develop a civilization that could become the beacon of the world. Both the people of Pakistan and Afghanistan need to recognize the roots of this conflict. Western interference has only exacerbated the problem, not solved it. The same old secular solutions haven't solved this problem for the past 80 years or so. Nationalistic interests, Western interference, secular systems haven't benefited either people. It can be the case that an Islamic solution, the solution that both groups of people ultimately believe in and therefore can be unified upon, and unified upon the solutions that Islam offers. And if that is the case, then not only could Afghanistan and Pakistan become a beacon for the Muslim world, but actually for the entire world itself.